Hey guys, I wanted to do a video on how I plan my canoe trips to the Boundary Waters Canoe Area Wilderness. I had a friend ask me back in December, said she was going to the Boundary Waters with some friends for the first time this year. It wasn't her first canoe trip, but it was her first Boundary Waters trip, and she was like asking me if is there anything I should think of, any questions I should ask the group, anything I should be aware of. And I was like, I've learned a few things, I feel like, And so I sent over a list of questions to her, basically asking, like, what are you trying to do? What do you want to see? Are you trying to catch fish? How portage heavy or not heavy do you want this to be? All that stuff. To really just help her and her group really just figure out where they want to go and what they want to do. So I decided to put it together in a video. So I'm going to give you a little insight into my general trip planning process, how I figure out which route to do, and based on the constraints and typical variables for me and the two friends that I usually go with, and then obviously abstract that a little bit. So I'll give you a bit of background behind the typical trips. We like to do 8-day trips. That's usually Saturday through Saturday. So we'll take a whole day off, a whole week off from work, 5 days, and we'll enter on Saturday and then we'll exit on Saturday afternoon. So that gives us a full 8 days. And we'll drive up the night before after work on Friday. We live in Minneapolis. We all live in the Minneapolis metro, so we're able to get up to the Boundary Waters in about 5 hours. So that helps us save an entire day. Some people have to drive from far away, so we feel very lucky to live that close. So we have done 9 days. Sometimes we'll extend into Sunday, but it's nice to have 1 day to decompress before going back to work. So 8 days is a pretty typical trip for us. We've done 3-person canoes for these, and it's worked out fine. We did a Minnesota 3 in 2018, and then we used a Seneca, both Winona canoes, Winona Seneca this year, and it worked out great. It was a more stable canoe than the Minnesota 3, had more freeboard. But we've got ultralight gear that we've kind of splurged on for hiking and for canoeing, and it helps us fit everything into 2 portage packs that weigh about 45 to 50 pounds each. And that's pretty light. Some people with, cheaper, just heavier, bigger, bulkier gear can get up to like 60, 70 pound packs. And it's just insane. And sometimes it won't even fit in a single canoe, depending on how much food you bring and again, just the type of gear you have. And so we use a 10-gallon barrel to fit all the food for 3 guys for 8 days. It doesn't quite fit everything though. So we also use a Ursack Major XL. It's essentially like a bear-proof Kevlar bag that you can just tie to a tree. And so it has some smell-proof bags or smell-resistant bags called lock sacks in there. So we just put the Ursack inside one of the portage packs, and that's enough food with the barrel for 3 guys for 8 days. We did that same for 9 days as well. And so to save on the volume, we do dehydrated meals for dinner. We don't bring a lot of fresh food, but we like to do something nice on night 1. So we'll do steaks with an onion, or we'll do spaghetti where we make the sauce at home and noodles and stuff, and we'll reheat it there. Dehydrated meals are just really volume efficient, and we'll cut open the bags from the backpacker's pantry or whatever, dump it all into a Ziploc, cut off the label and the instructions, and then throw them in the bottom of the barrel, and it saves on a lot of weight. Well, not that much weight, but volume and trash as well, because we don't need to cook in the bags. We just pour it into a pot of boiling water. And then we typically push hard on the first day to get deeper into the interior, and I'll talk about that later. And then we also like to use Kevlar canoes to make portaging a lot easier. So, knowing that, I think about a couple things. Where do I want to go? What do I want to see? Do I want to do something where I haven't been before, or do I want something familiar? Sometimes familiarity is really nice, and it makes things a little bit easier. I'm not really interested in seeing burn areas. So, there's not a lot of shade, so I don't really want to camp in them. They can be kind of novel, very striking, but they're just not that pretty to look at, in my opinion, so I don't really want to camp in a burn. And that, again, affects where I go, because there have been quite a few different fires in the Boundary Waters that have spoiled a few areas, I feel like. I really like elevation and clear water. It's just really cool scenery for me. It's like the North Shore with all the cliffs and bluffs and palisades and giant boulders. And I really like elevation. It just looks cool. It's kind of like the mountains, but in Minnesota. I also like really remote areas. I feel like you get what you put in for the effort, and it's cool to be the only people there. And I think you have a higher likelihood of seeing wildlife because there's not as many humans in that area that come through there. And then I read, BWCA.com. I watch people's trip reports on YouTube, and I read their trip reports on BWCA.com and Paddle Planner. And so I've got a long list of places I want to go already, and I've already plotted out those routes, and I can talk about those later as well. And so really when I plot out a route, again, I think, where do I want to go? It's really, are we doing sightseeing, and are we going to travel and do a loop through somewhere where we haven't been before, or are we going to try and do a lot of fishing? And then, and sort of just relax, cook, hang out, and maybe do some day trips. And so on fishing, are we trying to catch any specific type of fish, like giant smallies, lake trout, stocked trout, a bunch of eater-sized walleyes? And that's really going to push you to different parts of the boundary waters. For example, the west side, west of Ely, doesn't have the deep, cold lakes that lake trout really like. And so if you want to catch lake trout, for example, that's going to push you to the east side near the Gunflint or just the central boundary waters. And so, again, that's going to push you to different areas. Some lakes are known for great walleye fisheries. So that's a consideration for fishing. When I'm not going with my two friends that I typically go with, I think about who the group members are and how fit they are, if they're gung-ho enough to do a longer route. And I'm not an example of a fit person by any means, but I push myself, and I really like the challenge of a good workout and a good sweat. And so that's sort of a personal goal for me. Even though I'm not very fit at all, I don't mind doing longer and harder routes that push me physically and challenge me to push the boundaries of what I'm capable of. So days that are 8 to 10 hours, or I got to do really hard portage or a couple of them, I'm open to that, but not everybody is, and that's totally fine. So if everyone is up for a workout, I usually look at doing a 40 to 50 mile route. 50 is the longest I've done, but I'm looking at a potential 60 mile route in an 8-day trip. Haven't done it yet, obviously, but I'm looking at it. And then if people are looking for more relaxation, you're doing base camping, I look at more of like a 25 to 40 mile route. And 40 miles is really only doable if a lot of that distance is paddling. For example, Knife Lake is something like 7 or 8 miles end to end, whether you go through the south arm or the north arm. And so you can cover that ground a lot faster than portaging. So 40 miles isn't as long as a 40-mile route where you're doing a lot of portaging. So once I've figured out the areas that I'm going to go in, I think about outfitters and who I'm going to go through, because I don't have a canoe. And we drive up the night before. So one thing is bunkhouse with late arrivals or a campground. Can we get there the night before at like 11 p.m. and just crash in a bunkhouse? Or a campground, maybe we set up a tent and we just get up early in the morning and then we grab our permits and go in. And that's another thing. I like to stay right on the lake. It's nice to just be like in the wilderness and, you're right there. You don't need to take a van ride in the morning. Most entry points don't have an outfitter right on the lake. So like you have to drive there or get a ride there. And that's totally fine. It's not what I prefer, but I've got more than a couple of routes that do require that. So I just really like waking up, you're already on the lake, you're on the edge of the wilderness, and all you got to do is head in. So that's great. And then with outfitters, showers are a huge thing. It's nice to wash the dirt and sweat off of you after a week. So I really appreciate showers. Do they have desirable Kevlar canoes? Sometimes you want ones with a lot of capacity, some that are really stable, some that are really fast. So outfitters, you look at the types of canoes they have to offer. And then do they give tows? For example, on Moose Lake, you can go to Prairie Portage, you can go to Basswood, you can go to the Sucker Lake Portage or into Birch, or you can go to Splash Lake, and they'll just throw canoes on top of on a John boat and give you a ride over there, and it saves you hours of paddling and gets you into the wilderness a lot quicker. So I really like a tow, and they're pretty affordably priced. Most of the time, I like doing loops. I like seeing new stuff, and you can do what's called a lollipop, where you just kind of come up one spot, you do a loop around, and then you go back down the way you came in, and that's totally fine too. I just like seeing new things generally if I can, and so and going in and then coming out the same way you went in for a shorter trip, if you don't have a lot of time, or you're trying to get to a very specific lake for fishing or something like that, or for sightseeing and you're going to do some day trips, that's totally fine. Especially if you're doing day trips and you're kind of breaking out in different directions, it's fine to go back out the way you came in. And again, this is all personal preference. See, this is just what I prefer. So knowing all that, I really like Paddle Planner. Paddle Planner is a tool that calculates routes for you based on different campsites, and they have it for the Boundary Waters, Quetico, I think Woodland Caribou, Wabakimi, Algonquin, Apostle Islands, like all these different parks and wilderness areas. And but for Boundary Waters, it's super great. You pick your paddling speed, portaging speed, the number of trips you're going to do. So normally we double carry across a portage. So you carry half your gear across once, you walk back, and then you grab the rest of your gear and you come back. So it's 3 total trips across the portage. It's possible to single carry, but you got to consolidate your gear, and then you're carrying like a 60 or 70 pound pack as well as a canoe. And it just doesn't sound very exciting to me, especially having to leave some gear at home, and then it's not as accessible because it's all in one big pack. And yeah, but Paddle Planner lets you select all those things, and it'll calculate routes, and it has reviews for campsites, photos of campsites. People put photos of different areas on the lake with fish and portage landings. People put reviews for portages and let you know if they're hard or beautiful. There are elevation charts for the portages as well, so you can see kind of what you're getting yourself into. It's just super, super handy to know more about the area that you're considering going to. And so the thing with Paddle Planner is the times that it gives you are general estimates. You can't say, oh, it says 4 hours, it's going to take me 4 hours. You got to pad that time because wind, weather, personal fatigue, and the number of portages you have and load and unload times, it's all going to factor into how long it takes you. So what I typically do is I add 25 to sometimes 40% more time on top of what Paddle Planner tells me for distance or for time. So if it tells me like something, a leg is going to take me 4 hours, I think maybe it's closer to 5. If I see 6.5, I think it's more like 8. If I see 8, I think it could take me 10. And so I typically don't look for legs. I try and plan my legs at 6.5 hours in Paddle Planner generally, because it could take up to 8 hours, and that's about as long as I or my friends generally want to do in a day. So again, those delays will be there, and you need to look for campsites around where you're looking to stay. Don't bet on getting the campsite you want. And sometimes if the lake that you're looking to camp on only has 1 or 2 or 3 sites, look on the other lakes and see if there are any other sites you'd consider staying on. You need alternate routes, and you got to plan for the worst, hope for the best. So Paddle Planner helps you do all that and get ideas of where you can go and alternate routes, and it has reviews for many of the campsites. So I use Paddle Planner for all that stuff. For travel heavy routes where we're doing a lot of sightseeing and traveling, I'm looking at travel days between 5 and 7 hours on Paddle Planner. That's what Paddle Planner says, 5 to 7. So it's going to be more like 6 to 8 hours or 8.5 hours in real time. For relaxation and base camp routes where we're traveling between campsites, but we're not, looking to push real hard because we want to stop and fish and do whatever, those are 3 to 5 hours in Paddle Planner. So it's going to take more like 4 to 6 hours in real time. We do push pretty hard on our first day. We'll do 8 to 10 hours real time. Last year we did a 12-hour day. It was 22 miles. It was crazy. We all said, let's not do that again anytime soon. And it was a nice day, but it just, we were so exhausted by the end of it. So we push in hard on that first day, because if you do, sometimes you'll end up getting a site that you want. Sometimes you'll be able to camp on the lake you want. Sometimes it'll even save you like an entire day. Instead of doing 2 5-hour days, you can do a single 10 or 11-hour day. I mean, you don't want to do 11 hours a lot of the time, but if you push to like a 9-hour day or 10-hour day, you can get an entire extra day of fishing, lounging around camp, day trip, and especially if weather is looking kind of iffy. If you have good weather and you push in on that day, you save yourself having to travel in the rain or heavy winds. So I'm a huge advocate for pushing hard on the first day, especially if weather permits. But I don't really like pushing out for really long days. So like 6 hours is what I prefer to do, because I just like to soak in the wilderness and really just enjoy it for that last day rather than spend 8 hours slogging it out. I like to take the time and know that we got a later pickup, 2-3 p.m. pickup time, so we just take our time and paddle slow and drink it in. Just drink it in. So knowing all this, I've gone into Moose Lake for many trips because of the area around it that you can see. There's not a lot of burn around it. You got to go pretty far to see any burn, and there's plenty of routes you can do without ever seeing any burn at all. Knife Lake is incredible. Ensign Lake has great fishing, tons of campsites. A lot of people love base camping there, and you can go further into other lakes like Jordan and Ima. There's waterfalls around Caddyman. Knife has some waterfalls further down near Eddy Lake. It has Thunder Point. It's got Dorothy Moulter's cabin. Great fishing. I mean, there's just so many good options around Moose Lake and around Knife Lake. You can also go to Basswood as well. Huge lake with great fish potential, but you need to be careful going there with newbies because it is a big lake and you could get windbound. There could be some real big waves there. It also does allow motors on the eastern side of the lake, but it stops at a place, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a certain point on the lake where motors aren't allowed west of that point. So you can paddle that. It's a pretty large lake, great for base camping as well. I've stayed with an outfitter called Williams and Hall on Moose Lake, and they've been very gracious to us. I think their prices are pretty fair. Their staff are pretty knowledgeable and they're kind. If you stay with them, make sure to talk to Dave about fishing. He's in the outfitting building, and he's the guy who's going to get you your permit and everything. He knows a lot about fishing. He can give you some spots or some tips on what's been working lately, water temperatures, stuff like that. So Dave's awesome. Charlene usually runs a lot of the stuff. Charlene is great as well. You might see Blaine Hall, who's I think one of the founders or he's related to the founders. It's Williams and Hall. So Blaine is cool as well. I got to see him for the first time this year. But Williams and Hall has worked out great. They've got the bunkhouse that you can arrive late at. They do breakfast for you. They've got pancakes, sausage, bacon, eggs, coffee, orange juice, the whole thing. It's a sit-down thing. They're doing it different for the pandemic, but great breakfast. We like to usually just get in and go as soon as they're open, but into the wilderness. But breakfast is a great option as well. They have showers, the whole shower room essentially with like 5 or 6 shower heads. So you can, do a decent group of guys or girls split up. They've also got toilets in there, obviously. So you can take showers and all that afterwards. They do tows to all the places you're going to want to go. They've got a good canoe selection for solo to 3-person canoes. And then one thing that we've really come to like is that when you get back, they'll offer you a complimentary cold beer or a soda. And it's nice to just chill out in the parking lot and sip on a nice Lost Lake lager. Tastes like the Boundary Waters. But Moose Lake is a great spot to go for beginners, experienced people. It's just beautiful. No burn anywhere nearby, really. Lots of route options, loops, in and out. You got primitive management areas. You got base camp options. It's just a fantastic place to go. So I will be back to Moose and to Knife Lake many times in the future. So anyway, hope this has been helpful. I'm sorry this has run on for so long. I've already shot this twice because I've just been blabbing. There's so many things I could say about how I plan trips, and if you have, food allergies or you want to bring more fresh food, it's going to affect how, the number of the size of the packs you got to bring, and you might not be able to fit all your food and packs in a single canoe. So if you do 2 people or 3 people with a ton of stuff, you might need to split into 2 canoes. I mean, there's so many considerations that you might need to make. There's other things where if you have your own canoe and you pick up your permit at a forest at a ranger station like the day before, if you drive up even earlier, say if you're retired and you can drive up on Friday morning and you stop at a ranger station, pick up your permit, have dinner in Ely or something, and then in the morning you can just go straight in. You already got your permit. You can stay at a campground or whatever right at an entry point like Kuishiwi Lake. There's a campground right there, or Sawbill. You can stay right there and just go in the next day. So there are different freedoms. Some lakes have really cool tow options, like Loch LaCroix doesn't allow motors on the US side, but it does on Canada. And so you can get a tow from some outfitting services like Anderson's or Zups. I think it's Zups or Zoops. But they have these bigger boats with like 250 horsepower motors, and you get like an hour-long crazy boat ride across Loch LaCroix, and they'll drop you off anywhere you want. So there are some really, really cool options depending on what gear you've got. If you want to throw, and those tows are expensive. It's like $270 round trip for those Loch LaCroix tows. But if you want to throw some money at it, it's not only a fun time. I haven't done it yet, but I want to. It's not only a fun time, but it saves you a ton of time and gets you into some spots that would take you a day, 2 days to paddle to, depending on where you come from. So you can access some really cool parts of the park and really save yourself some time, make the most of your time off, and get to some really cool spots. So a lot of options. I'm going to be done talking here. I've got a list of questions and things you should consider for yourself and your group if you're going or thinking about going that will help you scope the areas you should be looking at. I don't talk about every possibility of if this, then you should go here, but a lot of questions, and if you can answer those, it'll help you really narrow down. And you can even feed those answers and say, hey, I've figured out this is what I want to do and what we're willing to accomplish and the types of things we want to see and the type of fish we want to catch. You can go to any outfitter and they'll be able to point you in the right direction depending on where you think you might want to go, Ely or Gunflint side, for example. So if you have any questions at all, if you want my advice, I've only done maybe 35 cumulative days in the Boundary Waters total, maybe 40, I don't know. So I'm not an expert by any means, but if you have any questions or you want my opinion on anything, please don't hesitate to ask in the comments. Any questions, criticism, feedback, I'm more than happy to answer and consider all that. So leave that down in the comments. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. It helps me out. Subscribe if you want to see more canoeing content, more hiking, gear reviews, and I'll see you guys again real soon. Stay tuned for the 2020 trip series. It's coming, I promise, in 4K. So stay tuned. Thanks for watching.